believe it. Okay, I'm going to give you some statistics today about marriage, and it's said that in gay marriage there is less divorce. Now, how they get these statistics when gay marriage is only being instituted for a matter of like days, and they're already coming out with statistics that, yeah, by the way, gay marriage is less divorces in gay marriage than there is in heterosexual marriage. Where are they getting their statistics from? Argentina. Now, what they don't tell you, of course, is that if there is less divorce in gay marriages than there are in heterosexual marriages, then there is most definitely more promiscuity in gay marriages than there are in heterosexual marriages. Because if you look at both the statistics for the men and women in the gay community, they even admit in most cases that the whole marriage scenario doesn't really affect them, because they prefer to be single and they prefer to be promiscuous. That's not Prometheus, that's another film, I think. Promiscuous in their behaviour. Okay, so, but certainly within a heterosexual marriage, whether it's Christian or Muslim or whatever it is, you know, sex is a very important thing to consider. You don't marry somebody because you think that you like them. Okay, you don't marry somebody because they look good. Okay, the basis for marriage in most cases for women is two things, and this is statistics again. Basically, they get the word love confused with sex. Okay, but it is admitted that many women actually marry because of sex and because of money. Okay, these are the two main reasons that a woman would get married. They look at the man to see if he's a nice house, or they'd see if he's earning good money, and then they would say, okay, that's one reason. Another reason would be for sex. Okay, that they found a partner that they're very happy with, that they're being fulfilled with in their sexual life, which is when you reach puberty, that becomes a factor in human relationships. You know, we're not all babies. We're not all like 5-year-old children walking around and you know, holding hands very innocently. Although marriage should be like that, you know, marriage should be like two people being brought together by God for the purposes of God to fulfill His purposes and to do His will together. Okay, but the adult world is just simply not like that, and I think that's one of the reasons why Jesus Christ actually said to His disciples, including some of His disciples, by the way, were women. There was one or two instances that you know, Christ, even as we discussed the other day, helped to free the woman who was accused of adultery, even though to the letter of the law she couldn't be stoned because there wasn't the proper points of that law which were actually being fulfilled. You know, there had to be the other party there, as we discussed in a previous video. So, but the point is here is that first of all, in God's sight, of course, that sodomy and homosexuality and so on is a sin. Whether you choose to get married or not, it doesn't really matter. If you're doing it, it's a sin in God's sight. You really have to get born again. You really have to let go of these desires. And I really quite find it quite funny when these women or men say that these things are genetic. Well, if they're genetic, then how did your mother and father have you? You see how much sense that actually makes? And then let's say a gay couple actually begin to adopt children. Now let's say, for example, it's two lesbians and the child that they adopt is a boy. Now how is that boy meant to learn a healthy relationship between a man and a woman if all he has to go by is two women? Okay. It doesn't, you know, they can teach about relationships and about things all they want, but how children actually learn is by example, by actually studying people's behaviour, by studying their parents' behaviour, and this is why that, you know, when many children grow up in many heterosexual marriages, they make a choice to be gay because They don't really want to suffer the things that they saw their parents go through. And then they kind of realise that in doing that, they've kind of thrown the baby out literally with the bathwater, and the fact that, in their so-called civil union, or whatever you want to call it, basically they're not producing children, they're not having families, and if they choose to adopt children, they'll quickly discover that these children will be kind of looking at them a little bit funny in most cases. And, what can you say about that? Children need a good example. Certainly, when you look at the Semitic religions and other religions, they try to teach respect between men and women so that they can have good, healthy relationships, that they can have good communication between one another, that the needs of the man and the woman are being fulfilled in these relationships without really too severe demands being put upon these situations. As I said before, I know certain couples where, couples get married because of sex, but there's nothing really more to that relationship than that. All it is when the man will come in, let's say for example, the man comes in from his work, and the woman, basically they don't really have much of a communicational life, but still they have a good sexual life. And let's say that they will sleep together most of the night or all night, and they can discuss utility bills, I guess, in between that. And then the man will go off to work, and the woman will just be left there, basically to, I guess, improve her household keeping skills. Or I guess she could go out and, work a little bit if she chooses, But the point is, and the other factor to look at is money. Some women get married for money, therefore the sex life is almost non-existent, basically. When these women get married for money, it could be vice versa. But usually the man, of course, is quite up for sex. It's very rare occasions that he isn't. I believe I heard a story that there was one farmer that he got married to this woman, but he chose not to sleep with her for around, I believe it was well over a decade before he actually consummated that marriage. He was a farmer, but he chose to basically have his wife as a companion, and his wife was actually quite happy to be his companion and possibly attend church together and actually build quite a nice friendship together. And after 10 years, that couple actually had sex, and then they began to have children. So it really depends on the people. If the people themselves are happy with each other, if they actually understand one another's mind, if there is an honesty there, basically what I'm saying is a transparency between couples, an understanding as to why they got married. And indeed, if they're in a true Christian marriage, what they will do is that they will seek God's will together, and they will do God's will together very prayerfully as one body. And that is extremely rare. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you look at all the examples in different religions of what marriage is, basically in the Muslim religion, marriage is just mostly for producing children. Some of them have quite good soul relationships with their wife, but most of the time the wife is dominated by the male, by the male's needs, by the male's requests. And that is biblical, by the way. Okay, it's biblical. But at the same time, are these men, living for the glory of God? Well, I don't know, maybe they are. I'm not saying they are or not, but what I'm saying is that a true godly marriage is two people coming together in agreement, and basically that usually, in most cases, it's biblical for the woman to be submissive and actually learn from her husband the word of God. Okay, very, very rare occasions. I mean, I have spoke to a lot of women actually who are believers that are married to unbelievers, and they've been continually. I'd say one of the highest requests on YouTube that I've had is women who are actually married to unbelievers, and that used to ask me for advice and things like that. But I mean, I wouldn't go above or beyond the advice that's already written in Scripture. That if you're happy to be married to that person, then you just continue to pray for that person's salvation. You continue to be a good witness, like Esther was a tremendous witness for God and a fantastic wife You know, she was the example of how a wife should be, and it's certainly she was married to a king who had other wives, who had concubines, but Esther was the king's favourite. But, you know, you're talking today's terms, you know, male-female relationship, you really got to be an example for God, show God's love, pray for your husband to be saved. And in many cases, these men actually come to faith in Jesus Christ because of their believing wives, and because of the love they've actually seen in these believing wives. Okay, you don't win somebody for Christ by actually going to your pastor and putting pressure on that person to convert for some way. And I know in one instance actually, this couple got married, and it seemed to be that everybody thought that they got married for love. But on one occasion, the woman actually tried to take the man's house away from him, and which wasn't successful. And not just that, but actually sought the church's backing in the actions that she was taking. She thought she was within her biblical rights to actually not only have a divorce from this man, because she just decided one day that this man wasn't a Christian, which he was a professing born-again believing Christian, but one day she just got up and decided, well, this guy, he isn't behaving like a Christian, so I'm just going to divorce him. So I believe that I can take his house, I believe that I can take basically everything belongs to me. And they actually sought the church's backing, and believe it or not, the church actually backed the woman in this case, because she claimed that she was a Christian, and they believed that she was a Christian and not the man. But what actually happened was, I believe in this case, that the lawyers actually went in favour of the man, because you know, in a legal court, that you must still prove if you should be getting a divorce from someone on the basis of something such as adultery. And you've always got to have a reliable witnesses for that. But these things, you know, basically, that's why Satan is called the accuser of the brethren. Okay, what Christians should never do is be involved in accusations. And what this church even did was rally around this woman and actually stayed at this man's house, and basically made that man feel as if he was just completely worthless, and tried to actually take that house away from that man. But because basically the legal system still protects people, you know, whether it be the male or the female, and a woman just can't come into a man's house and take everything. Okay, and if they're actually a married couple, they still actually require their evidence of there being adultery. And it wasn't, in this case, there was actually many people who stood with this woman, even though there was no evidence against the man in any case for adultery or whatever it was. So, you see, this is what I talk about when I say the feminist gospel. It's really bordering on just pure feminism, where basically you look at all the accounts in the Old Testament that the spirit of feminism was prevalent. And these are the times that there's been great catastrophes come upon nations that are like that. There's many examples of that in the Old and New Testament. Okay, where you have feminists trying to rule a relationship, and the church actually backing the women. Now, what I tend to say is that even though the Catholic Church, it does tend to back the male in most cases. Certainly the Jehovah's Witnesses still back the males if there's any controversy within the marriage. Certainly they usually tend to back the males. Okay, but what I'd say about the Catholic Church certainly is that there is basically Mariolatry, what's called Mariolatry, and what's described in the Old Testament is the Queen of Heaven, when the Israelites began to worship the Queen of Heaven. And very much in the Catholic Church, Mary is the Queen of Heaven. And see, this is a false pagan religious worship system. Okay, it's very important to realise that. And what you actually get is, in that church, within that church, in my own experience, is quite promiscuous ladies in that church. And obviously men as well can be that way too. But see, the real example is that Christ is looking for, if you're a true Christian, is that if you've made a covenant with God and you're born again, then if you get married, you should make a covenant with your spouse, and your spouse should therefore recognize that covenant in seeing what she needs to keep, what she needs to do, okay, to attain that covenant if she wants to be truly married to that man, what the expectations are of that covenant, and likewise she should produce her own marriage vows where the man is quite clear that he knows what is expected of him. Now obviously marriages today are not conducted like that, but in ancient Jewish, I'm talking about very ancient Jewish ceremonies, when you talk about when the patriarchs got married, and there was no such state marriages back then. You know, if you went and spoke to Abraham and Sarah and asked for their state marriage certificate, they would have looked at you as if you were crazy. Basically, they knew that God brought them together. They had a mutual understanding and relationship, and possibly had made some kind of marriage contract up, which they signed before witnesses, and therefore in God's sight they were married, and then they consummated the marriage. There was no such thing as a state marriage license or anything like that. But if you choose to go down these paths when you do get married, you got to realise that you basically have got to stay within their legal interpretation of what marriage is. But if you get married within a true godly relationship, then basically you should be done in a way, in a mutual sense, and it should be a strong leaning towards actually biblical understanding of what marriage is, and that basically the man is the head and so on. You look at all the New Testament scriptures, you know, the example of Jesus Christ and so on, and that, you know, the Jesus Christ is the head of the church and the man is the head of the woman, and that's basically Paul's writings, which I'll leave below for your further study. But you see, the state of humanity today is very much a consumer-based society, and basically what it's doing is just that it's just giving everybody a number and just making merchandise out of everybody, and where the soul principles are being lost. And whenever a government starts to take over religious institutions like marriage, you've seriously got to ask very, very serious questions. And you just got to remember Christ's words in Matthew 24, when he actually spoke about the days of Noah, and he mentioned marriage in his statement there, that they were buying and selling, and that they were marrying and building houses. He mentioned marriage. So today, marriage is such a very, very high topic today, very, very much discussed in the media today. A lot of media propaganda trying to say that gay marriage is the best, when we've not even had gay marriage for 5 minutes, and they're telling us it's better than heterosexual marriage. There's certainly got to be something very wrong in this case.